If you are anything like me, you absolutely live for that sudden aha moment.
Oh, yeah. The click.
Right, exactly. You know the exact like that split second where a massively complex idea it suddenly clicks right into place.
Mm-hmm.
And it permanently shifts the way you see the entire world around you.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like it.
But if you're also like me, you probably want to get to those breakthrough moments without drowning in this relentless sea of information overload.
Right, because there's just so much noise out there.
Exactly. You want the insight, you definitely crave the depth, but you also, highly respect your own time.
Absolutely.
Well, you are in exactly the right place. Welcome to today's deep dive. We have an incredibly fascinating stack of notes in front of us today.
We really do.
And our shared mission is to explore a highly counterintuitive, yet remarkably effective approach to creativity, to problem solving, and frankly, just navigating your daily life.
Yeah, it applies to almost everything.
We are looking at materials that span 12th century architecture, Renaissance sculpture, and some notoriously dense philosophy.
Some very dense philosophy.
But all of it points to the hidden transformative power of subtraction. Okay, let's unpack this, because to really wrap our heads around this concept, we have to start by looking at some monumental physical examples.
And I mean monumental in the most literal, earth-shattering sense of the word.
Right. So let's travel back to the 12th century, to the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela.
It is the perfect starting point, because these structures completely upend our fundamental assumptions about how human beings create anything.
Yeah.
When we think about building a grand piece of architecture, our brains automatically default to the logic of addition.
Sure, you clear a space.
Right. You clear space, you lay a foundation, you bring in timber, you add bricks, mix mortar.
You start with zero, and you incrementally stack materials upward into the sky.
Exactly. But the craftsmen who created the 11 churches at Lalibela in Ethiopia, they looked at that entire paradigm and just threw it out the window.
They did the exact opposite.
It did.
I was reading through the descriptions of this process in our notes, and it genuinely sounds like an impossible feat of engineering. They didn't build upwards at all.
Not even a little bit.
They located an area of solid, red, volcanic tough rock, and they chiseled downwards into the earth.
Yeah, straight down.
I want you to really visualize this for a second. Imagine standing on a flat expanse of solid bedrock. Instead of bringing in stones from a quarry to build a wall, you look down at your feet, take out a hammer and chisel, and start removing the earth.
It's wild to picture.
They meticulously carved away the surrounding rock, going deeper and deeper, cutting this massive trench into the ground until what was left standing in the center was a monolithic, intricate, fully formed building.
And the margin for error there is terrifying if you really think about it.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
Because if you're stacking bricks and you make a mistake, you just remove the brick and try again.
Right. There's an undue function in additive construction.
Exactly. But when you are carving downward into solid volcanic bedrock, specifically to create something as breathtaking as the Church of St. George, which is shaped like a massive cross, there is no undo button.
None at all.
If you strike the rock too hard and shear off what is supposed to be a roof column, the entire structure is permanently ruined.
You can't just glue it back on.
You can't. Yet they removed thousands of tons of surrounding rock to leave behind these massive, freestanding, subterranean structures.
Thousands of tons.
And they didn't just carve one room, they carved 11 distinct churches, and they're all connected by an elaborate network of subterranean trenches and tunnels.
It's unbelievable.
It really is. And this methodology is a prime physical manifestation of a concept we are going to be exploring today called via negativa.
The negative way.
Right, the negative way. The architecture, the awe-inspiring beauty, the utility of the building, none of it was created by adding material. It was entirely revealed by taking material away.
It's such a profound psychological shift. You aren't forcing a new structure into existence. You are, quite literally, liberating a hidden form from the earth.
Liberating form, yes. I love that phrasing.
The empty space around the church is what gives the church its definition. And that idea of liberating form through subtraction brings us to another world-famous example in our sources.
A huge leap forward in time.
Yeah, happening a few hundred years later during the Italian Renaissance. Let's talk about Michelangelo sculpting the David between 1501 and 1504.
A masterpiece.
The raw physical details here are staggering. He starts with this massive 17-foot tall block of marble. It weighed roughly 12,000 pounds.
That is 6 tons of solid rock.
6 tons. But the detail that really caught my attention was the history of this specific stone. This giant block of marble, which they apparently called the Giant, had actually been abandoned by previous artists.
Yeah, it was considered a reject.
Other sculptors had hacked away at it, decided the marble was flawed or maybe too narrow to work with, and basically gave up. It sat out in the weather for decades.
Just gathering dust.
But Michelangelo looks at this ruined slab and sees something entirely different.
What's fascinating here is Michelangelo's underlying philosophy regarding the marble itself. He didn't look at that 12,000-pound block and think, how do I force my artistic vision into this stubborn piece of stone?
Right.
He operated from the deeply held belief that the sculpture of David was already entirely complete, resting in perfect proportion within the marble block.
That is so cool.
The artist's only job, in his view, wasn't to create something new. His only job was simply to remove the unnecessary parts.
Just take away the excess.
He had to take a chisel and painstakingly strip away everything that was not David.
It completely reframes the pressure of creation. You aren't tasked with conjuring a masterpiece out of thin air. Your only responsibility is to rescue the masterpiece from the excess material trapping it.
Rescue is the perfect word for it.
And the result of that highly specific subtractive process was revolutionary for art history. Before Michelangelo, artists traditionally depicted David after the battle.
Right, usually as this victorious, somewhat arrogant youth standing over the severed head of Goliath.
But by chipping away everything that wasn't essential, Michelangelo revealed a mature, highly thoughtful David. It's a figure captured in that incredibly tense, contemplative moment right before the battle, sizing up an impossible opponent.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, both the 12th century craftsman in Lalibela and Michelangelo in his Renaissance studio share a profound, unifying artistic principle.
They both achieved their towering historical masterpieces by liberating form through the removal of excess.
Exactly. They didn't achieve greatness by agonizing over what to add. They achieved greatness by mastering what to eliminate.
Masterful subtraction.
The empty space they relentlessly carved out was just as vital to the final piece as the stone that remained.
Which takes us into some really fascinating intellectual territory. We've seen the physical evidence of this concept in volcanic rock and in a 6-ton block of marble. But I was looking at this term in the notes, via negativa, and trying to wrap my head around it outside of an art studio.
It's a bit of a paradigm shift.
It is, because on the surface, the negative way sounds almost pessimistic. It sounds like a rejection of things. But when you dig into the history of philosophy, it is actually a deeply profound tool for uncovering truth.
It is, and it requires a bit of a mental leap because we are so conditioned to define things by what they are.
Right.
At its core, the via negativa is a method of understanding, describing, or achieving something by focusing intensely on what it isn't, rather than trying to neatly define what it is.
Focusing on the negative space.
Precisely. It emphasizes what you need to avoid, remove, or strip away in order to gain clearer knowledge. And this becomes absolutely crucial in situations where our positive definitions, our endless attempts to accurately describe complex things by adding words, labels, and categories, ultimately fall short.
And reading through the history here, this isn't just a quirky mental model for modern thinkers. This approach has very deep, ancient roots in how humanity has tried to understand the divine.
It does.
It was heavily utilized in theology.
Absolutely. The lineage of this idea traces back to Neoplatonism. Instead of viewing the universe as a massive collection of separate, distinct objects that we can slap neat little labels onto, Neoplatonic thinkers saw all of existence as flowing from a single, indescribable, infinite source.
Okay.
And a bit later, early mystics, most notably a highly influential figure known as Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, took this idea and developed what we now call negative theology.
Negative theology.
Right. And it stands in direct, stark contrast to the via positiva, which is our standard affirmative way of describing the world.
Because our standard human default is to conquer the unknown by naming it. We want to point at something mysterious and say, okay, this is exactly what this is. I have categorized it. I understand it.
Exactly. And in theology, the via positiva attempts to describe the divine by giving it positive human attributes. But negative theology pushes back hard against that instinct.
It says we can't do that.
It argues that the divine essence fundamentally transcends the limits of human language. Our concepts, our vocabulary, our earthly frameworks are simply too small, too finite to accurately encapsulate something infinite.
It's like trying to pour the ocean into a teacup.
That's a great analogy. If you try to define the infinite with a finite word, you aren't describing it. You are actually insulting its vastness.
Wow.
So Pseudo-Dionysius argued that the most accurate, intellectually honest way to approach an understanding of God is by stating what God is not.
There is a really beautiful clarifying example of this in the reading. In a traditional additive approach, you might make the affirmative statement, God is love.
Which, of course, sounds lovely on the surface.
It does. But the via negativa approach steps in and says, wait a minute, human beings have a very flawed, highly conditional, and often totally selfish understanding of what love actually means.
Very true.
We associate love with jealousy or biological drive or a transaction. So if you explicitly say God is love, you are accidentally shrinking the divine down to fit into a very messy, human-sized box. And
That is the precise danger that negative theology is trying to circumvent. So instead of making that positive, limiting statement, the negative way would state that God is not limited by human concepts of love.
right.
Because whatever the divine is, it is entirely beyond all human description. By stripping away our earthly definitions, by actively removing the limited labels we desperately want to apply, you actually get closer to the truth of the divine essence.
You're carving away the excess.
You aren't arrogantly claiming to know exactly what it is. You are humbly admitting what it is not. It is the theological equivalent of Michelangelo chiseling away the marble. You are carving away the false human concepts to reveal the truth underneath.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we can take this lofty, ancient theological concept, this beautifully abstract idea of removing labels to find ultimate truth, and we can drag it right down into the mud of our everyday lives.
Oh, absolutely. It's incredibly practical.
We can move from rock-hewn Ethiopian churches and Neoplatonism directly into modern decision-making practical philosophy and how you, listening to this deep dive right now, can actually use this to make your life better.
We are crossing the bridge from ancient theology into what modern thinkers call subtractive epistemology.
Subtractive epistemology.
Now, epistemology is simply the philosophical study of knowledge, how we know what we know and how we justify our beliefs.
Right.
Subtractive epistemology is the profound realization that negative knowledge is actually vastly more reliable and, frankly, far more potent than positive knowledge.
Meaning knowing with absolute certainty what is wrong is way more valuable than believing you know what is right.
Yes. Because positive knowledge, believing you know the exact right way to do something or the absolute truth of a situation, is incredibly fragile.
It changes all the time.
It is constantly prone to error, to cognitive bias, and it can be instantly shattered by changing circumstances. But negative knowledge, knowing for an absolute fact what does not work, what is verifiably false, or what is actively harmful, is rock solid.
That makes total sense.
Once you know a stove will burn your hand, that knowledge doesn't degrade. Therefore, true, robust knowledge of the world advances not by constantly accumulating more facts, but by ruthlessly eliminating errors and bad ideas.
You just stop touching the hot stove.
Exactly. You achieve a much deeper understanding of reality by identifying what doesn't work, rather than guessing at what does.
The philosopher and risk analyst Nassim Nicholas Taleb is highlighted heavily here in our sources as he really popularized this specific framework for modern audiences.
He's a huge proponent of this.
Taleb argues forcefully that knowledge grows by subtraction. The ultimate goal isn't necessarily to become a towering genius who knows every single fact in the universe. The goal is to make yourself less wrong over time by systematically removing false assumptions from your mental models.
Just steadily carving away the errors.
And when you start looking at the world through this subtractive lens, the real-world applications are endless. Just look at the history of medicine.
Medicine might be the most terrifyingly perfect arena for the via negativa.
Oh, for sure.
Throughout human history, our desperate pursuit of positive knowledge in medicine, the constant urge to intervene, to find the miracle cure, to actively add a remedy to a sick patient, has frequently led to absolute disaster.
It's just massive harm.
Think about the centuries we spent utilizing bloodletting or prescribing toxic heavy metals like mercury to cure ailments.
Because they just had to do something.
They had to add a treatment. The subtractive epistemology approach argues that in medicine, avoiding poison and eliminating harm is infinitely more crucial than taking unproven remedies.
Right.
The body is an unimaginably complex system, and adding a new, poorly understood variable into that system usually causes more chaos.
Right. If you are feeling terrible, the very first step shouldn't always be, What new chemical supplement can I add to my body?
Almost never the right first step.
Often the vastly more robust, safer approach is, what harmful thing am I actively doing right now that I need to stop?
Exactly.
Removing a 2-pack-a-day smoking habit, removing an incredibly inflammatory diet, removing a massive source of chronic stress.
Just taking things away.
The subtraction yields a monumentally better outcome than just adding a random, highly marketed pill on top of a fundamentally broken foundation.
It's the only way to actually fix the foundation.
And this same logic translates flawlessly into the business and tech worlds.
It translates beautifully because in business, and especially in productivity culture, we are culturally obsessed with addition.
More.
We equate productivity with volume. We genuinely believe that doing a good job means launching more products, attending more meetings, and adding more features to an app.
It's exhausting.
But the via negativa approach tells us that enduring success is almost always found in the discipline of saying no. It is the immense power of saying no to 99 perfectly decent, okay ideas so that you can entirely focus your energy and resources on the one truly exceptional idea.
The notes mention the concept of removing code bloat, and if you work in software, or honestly, if you just own a modern smartphone, you know exactly how painful this is.
We've all experienced it.
A new program or app starts out incredibly fast, sleek, and efficient. It does one thing perfectly. But then, year after year, developers feel the pressure to justify their jobs. They need to show progress.
So they add a new feature.
And another feature. And another, the positive way. They keep stacking bricks. And what happens? The software becomes a sluggish, crashing, unusable mess of conflicting code.
It completely breaks down.
The solution to a slow app isn't to write a massive new optimization algorithm to slap on top of the pile. The solution is via negativa. You go in with a chisel and you aggressively remove the code bloat.
You have to.
You strip the program back down to its essential, beautiful, functional form, just like Michelangelo staring down that ruined block of marble.
And we can bring this all the way down to the most intimate level, personal life advice.
Which is probably the hardest one.
It is perhaps the most difficult application because it requires so much self-awareness. When people decide they want to improve their lives, their immediate knee-jerk instinct is to add.
Oh, absolutely. I need to add a complex new morning routine involving ice baths and journaling.
Right. I need to add a new gym membership. I need to add 3 more networking events to my weekly calendar.
I'll just pile it on.
We think a better life is a fuller life. But what the principle of negative knowledge strongly suggests is that you should instead focus your initial energy entirely on eliminating. Eliminate bad habits. Cut out toxic relationships that drain your energy. Remove inefficient systems from your daily workflow.
It's so liberating.
You will almost always see a much more dramatic, sustainable improvement in your overall well-being by simply stopping the things that are actively damaging you, rather than exhausting yourself trying to cram more good things into an already overloaded, chaotic life.
It is so wildly countercultural. In a society that constantly tells you to buy more, do more, and be more, it feels almost like cheating, doesn't it?
It really does.
To radically improve your life simply by doing less. But there is a golden quote in the reading that completely hammers this point home. It perfectly encapsulates this entire subtractive philosophy without any academic jargon.
It's a brilliant, incredibly grounding summary of everything we've discussed today. The quote from the sources is, "It's remarkable how much long-term advantage people like us have gotten by trying to be consistently not stupid instead of trying to be very intelligent."
I just love that phrasing. Consistently not stupid.
It's perfect.
That is the via negativa in a nutshell. Don't exhaust yourself trying to be the once-in-a-generation genius who invents the brilliant new additive solution to every problem. Just be the person who carefully, quietly avoids the obvious traps, the poisons, and the massive unforced errors.
Let everyone else make the unforced errors.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you step away from this deep dive today? It boils down to a fundamental, life-altering shift in perspective. Subtraction over addition.
That's the core of it.
Whether you are literally trying to carve a 12,000-pound block of Renaissance marble, or you are just looking at your calendar trying to figure out how to make your upcoming week a little less stressful, you will very often find far better, more robust outcomes by removing the unnecessary.
Absolutely.
True knowledge, breathtaking art, and lasting peace of mind don't necessarily advance by accumulating more stuff. They advance by eliminating what is false, what is distracting, and what is harmful.
This raises an important question, though, and it's one that gets right to the heart of human nature.
Okay.
If the via negativa is such a proven, reliable path to greatness, whether we're talking about the monumental subterranean architecture of Lalibela, the enduring ego-stripping theology of the early mystics, or robust modern decision-making, why do our human brains still instinctively default to addition?
That's a great question.
Why is our very first impulse in a crisis always to add a new feature, to buy a new product, or to create a new overly complicated rule to solve our problems?
It feels like we're doing something.
Exactly. Are we perhaps culturally wired to fear the empty space that subtraction leaves behind? Because if we are terrified of the emptiness, we will constantly fill it with noise.
Wow.
And if that's true, you have to ask yourself, think about your calendar, your career, or your relationships, like Michelangelo's block of marble. It might currently be a 12,000-pound unusable block of obligations and distractions. What masterpiece in your own life is currently trapped inside all of that, just waiting to be liberated from the excess?
Wow. That is exactly the kind of thought to chew on as you go about the rest of your day. You don't need to add anything new to your life today to make it better. Look for the excess, and don't be afraid to pick up the chisel.
Pick up the chisel. I like that.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We absolutely love sharing these learning journeys with you, unpacking these massive ideas, and hopefully making the world make just a little bit more sense, one concept at a time. Until next time, keep questioning the additions and embrace the power of subtraction.